Look, I'm going to tell you something that's going to make a lot of people uncomfortable, but someone needs to say it. Single men sleep better than married men ever will. And before you start throwing your phone across the room or typing angry comments about how wrong I am, hear me out. Because this isn't just some controversial take I pulled out of thin air to get views. This is backed by philosophy, psychology, and if you're honest with yourself, your own experience. Nietzsche understood something about human nature that modern society desperately tries to hide from you. He understood that comfort is the enemy of greatness, that safety is the death of authenticity, and that the moment you chain yourself to societal expectations, you begin dying a slow, invisible death. And marriage, my friend, is the ultimate societal expectation. It's the golden handcuffs that everyone tells you will set you free, but instead, it clips your wings before you even realize you could fly. Now, I know what you're thinking. This guy is bitter. He's jaded. He probably got his heart broken and now he's taking it out on the institution of marriage. Wrong. This isn't about bitterness. This isn't about anger. This is about truth. Raw, unfiltered truth that cuts through the fairy tales you've been sold since childhood. The truth that you're afraid to admit even to yourself when you're lying awake at 3 in the morning, staring at the ceiling, wondering where your life went. Nietzsche said that truth is a woman who has reasons for not showing us her reasons. And boy, does this truth have layers that most men never dare to peel back. Let's start with the most obvious thing: sleep. Actual, physical sleep. Single men sleep better because they control their environment completely. No compromises. No negotiations about the thermostat. No arguments about whether the window should be open or closed. No passive-aggressive sighs when you want to read for another 20 minutes before turning off the light. No cold feet pressed against your legs in the middle of the night. No discussions about the firmness of the mattress or the thread count of the sheets. You want the room at 62 degrees? Done. You want to fall asleep watching a documentary about ancient Rome at 2 in the morning? Nobody's stopping you. You want to starfish across the entire bed without worrying about invading someone else's space? The whole mattress is your kingdom. But here's where it gets deeper, and this is where Nietzsche's philosophy becomes absolutely crucial. The physical act of sleeping better is just the surface. It's a symptom of something much more profound. Single men sleep better because they sleep with a clear conscience. They're not constantly calculating, negotiating, and compromising their authentic selves to maintain peace in a relationship. They're not lying awake wondering if they said the wrong thing at dinner, or whether their partner is secretly disappointed in them, or whether they're living up to the image of the man they're supposed to be. Nietzsche called this the master morality versus the slave morality. The master creates his own values, lives by his own code, answers to his own conscience. The slave lives in reaction to others, constantly seeking approval, constantly afraid of judgment, constantly modifying behavior to fit someone else's expectations. Marriage, for most men, is an exercise in slave morality. You start out thinking you're entering a partnership of equals, but slowly, gradually, almost imperceptibly, you begin changing who you are to keep the peace. You stop doing things you love because they annoy your partner. You start doing things you hate because they make your partner happy. You moderate your opinions, censor your thoughts, and carefully curate your authentic self until you're not sure who you are anymore. And at night, when you finally lie down, your mind races through all these calculations, all these compromises, all these little deaths of the self that you've accumulated throughout the day. That's not sleep. That's exhaustion with your eyes closed. Single men don't have this problem. When a single man lays his head on the pillow, he's accountable only to himself. His day wasn't spent in a constant performance, constantly managing someone else's emotions while suppressing his own. He didn't spend his evening walking on eggshells, trying to say the right thing, trying to be the right version of himself. He just was. He existed. He lived. And when you live authentically, when you're not constantly code switching between who you are and who someone else needs you to be, you sleep the sleep of the just, deep, restorative, peaceful. Nietzsche wrote extensively about the concept of becoming who you are. Not who society tells you to be, not who your family expects you to be, not who your partner needs you to be, but who you actually are in your essence, stripped of all the masks and performances. Single men have the space to do this. They have the time, the freedom, the mental bandwidth to explore their own nature without constantly having to justify it to someone else. Married men, on the other hand, are often so busy being husbands that they forget to be men. They're so occupied with fulfilling a role that they lose sight of their essence. And let's talk about something that nobody wants to address openly, but everyone thinks about privately: sexual fulfillment. Or more accurately, sexual authenticity. Single men sleep better because they're not lying next to someone they're obligated to desire. They're not performing desire when they don't feel it. They're not managing someone else's sexual expectations while their own needs go unmet or, worse, become routine and predictable. Nietzsche understood that desire is one of the most honest forces in human nature. When you cage it, when you domesticate it, when you turn it into a scheduled activity on Thursday nights after the kids are asleep, you're not honoring your nature. You're betraying it. The single man's sexuality, whatever form it takes, is his own. He's not comparing himself to his partner's previous lovers. He's not wondering if he's still attractive to the person who sees him at his worst every single day. He's not negotiating his fantasies against someone else's boundaries. He's not feeling guilty for finding other people attractive. He's not channeling his sexual energy through the narrow, approved pipeline of monogamous marriage. He's free, and that freedom, that authenticity in one of the most fundamental aspects of human experience, translates directly into better sleep. No guilt, no performance anxiety, no routine obligation masquerading as intimacy. Now, before we go further, I want to know something. Where are you watching this from? What city? What country? Drop it in the comments because I'm genuinely curious about where these ideas are resonating. Are you in New York, grinding through the startup culture, wondering why everyone around you is racing to get married? Are you in London, surrounded by expectations that don't quite fit who you are? Are you in Sao Paulo, Tokyo, Mumbai, Sydney, trying to reconcile traditional expectations with modern realities? Let me know. Because this conversation, this uncomfortable truth, it's universal, but it manifests differently depending on where you are and what cultural programming you're trying to break free from. Here's something else that keeps married men awake at night: financial anxiety. And I'm not talking about the general stress of paying bills that everyone deals with. I'm talking about the specific grinding anxiety that comes from being financially responsible for someone else's happiness. The pressure to provide, to upgrade, to keep up with the neighbors, to fund a lifestyle that may not even be yours. Single men sleep better because their financial decisions affect only them. If they want to live simply, save aggressively, invest in experiences rather than things, there's nobody else's approval needed. If they want to take a financial risk, start a business, change careers, their decision doesn't ripple through someone else's life plan. Married men carry a different burden. They're not just managing their own relationship with money. They're managing their partner's expectations, their in-laws' judgments, the invisible scoreboard of social status that marriage often becomes. They're funding weddings, houses, kids, vacations, all while wondering if this is actually what they want or if they're just following the script they were handed. Nietzsche would call this the weight of the herd, the crushing pressure to conform to what everyone else is doing, even when it contradicts your own nature, your own desires, your own path. And the sleep connection? When your financial life is your own, when you're not constantly worried about meeting someone else's material expectations, when you're not lying awake wondering how you're going to pay for the lifestyle your marriage demands, you sleep better. Simple as that. The single man's financial stress, if he has any, is clean. It's about his goals, his choices, his path. The married man's financial stress is muddied with expectations, obligations, and the constant fear of disappointing someone he loves. Let's dig into something even more uncomfortable: the loss of male friendship in marriage. This is something married men rarely admit, but it's devastating. Before marriage, men have rich, deep friendships with other men. They have spaces where they can be completely honest, completely themselves, without filtering their thoughts through the lens of what's acceptable to say. They have brotherhood, camaraderie, the kind of bonds that philosophers and warriors throughout history have celebrated as the highest form of human connection. Then they get married, and slowly, almost invisibly, those friendships evaporate, not because their friends abandon them, but because marriage consumes all available time and energy. Date nights replace poker nights. Couples' dinners replace hanging with the boys. And even when married men do get together with their friends, there's a timer running. There's a text that's going to come in. There's an expectation that they'll be home by a certain time. There's the implicit understanding that their primary loyalty is now to their marriage, not to their friendships. Single men don't have this problem. Their friendships are primary, not secondary. They can invest in male bonding without guilt, without time limits, without having to justify why they want to spend time with their friends instead of their partner. And this matters for sleep because humans are social creatures. We need tribe. We need brotherhood. When that need is met, we sleep better. When it's chronically unmet, when we're isolated in the prison of coupledom, we lie awake feeling lonely even though there's someone sleeping right next to us. Nietzsche understood the importance of selective association, of choosing who you surround yourself with, based on who elevates you, who challenges you, who sees you. Marriage often forces you to trade that carefully curated circle for one person who may or may not fulfill all those roles. And when they don't, you're stuck. Single men are free to cultivate friendships that actually nourish them. Think about Sunday mornings for a moment. For single men, Sunday morning is potential. It's freedom. It's the ability to wake up and decide what the day holds based on nothing but your own desires in that moment. Want to go for a run? Go. Want to sit in a coffee shop reading philosophy for 3 hours? Do it. Want to call up friends for a spontaneous road trip? Why not? Want to do absolutely nothing but play video games in your underwear? Nobody's judging. Now think about Sunday mornings for married men. There are expectations. There are routines. There's brunch with the in-laws or errands that need running, or projects around the house that have been on the list for weeks. There's negotiation about whose family to visit, or what activity to do together. The freedom is gone, replaced by obligation masquerading as togetherness. And this pattern, this slow erosion of autonomy, it doesn't just affect Sunday mornings. It affects every morning. It affects how you wake up. Single men wake up to possibility. Married men wake up to agenda. And that difference, that fundamental difference in how you relate to time and choice, it affects your sleep. Because when you go to bed knowing that tomorrow is yours, that you're the author of your own story, you sleep differently than when you go to bed knowing that tomorrow is already scripted, already committed, already spoken for. Nietzsche called this the eternal return. The question he posed was this: if you had to live your life over and over again, exactly as it is for eternity, would you embrace it or would you curse it? Single men are more likely to embrace it because they're living by choice, not by obligation. Married men often realize in those quiet moments before sleep that they're living someone else's dream, not their own. Here's where it gets really interesting, and this is where most people will want to stop listening because it challenges everything they've been taught. Marriage is sold to you as the ultimate achievement, the final puzzle piece that completes your life. But Nietzsche would argue that this is exactly backward. He believed that the highest form of human existence is the one who creates, who overcomes, who constantly evolves beyond their current state. He called this the Übermensch, the overman, the person who transcends societal programming and creates their own values. And here's the brutal truth that nobody wants to hear. Marriage, for most men, is the death of becoming. It's the moment you stop evolving and start maintaining. You're no longer focused on who you're becoming. You're focused on being what you already are, because change threatens the stability of the relationship. Your partner fell in love with version 5.2 of you, and any attempt to upgrade to version 6.0 is seen as a betrayal, a deviation from the person they chose. Single men don't face this constraint. They can reinvent themselves completely without asking permission. They can pursue radical personal growth without worrying about whether their transformation will be compatible with someone else's life plan. They can take the hero's journey, the lonely path of self-overcoming that Nietzsche celebrated, without dragging someone else along who never signed up for that particular adventure. And this freedom to evolve, this permission to become, it translates directly into better sleep. Because when you're living a life of constant growth and self-creation, you're exhausted in the best possible way. You're tired from becoming, not from pretending. You're spent from pursuing your potential, not from managing someone else's expectations. And that kind of exhaustion leads to the deepest, most satisfying sleep imaginable. Let me paint you a picture of 2 different evenings, and you tell me which one leads to better sleep. Evening 1. A married man comes home after work. He's immediately hit with the emotional temperature of the house. His partner had a bad day, and even though it has nothing to do with him, he's now responsible for improving the mood. He listens, he validates, he problem solves when asked and doesn't problem solve when not asked, constantly calibrating his response to match what's needed. Then there's dinner to figure out, which becomes a negotiation rather than a simple decision. Then there's discussion about the weekend plans, about the thing his mother said last Tuesday, about whether they should finally replace the couch. By the time he gets to bed, he's emotionally depleted from managing not just his own internal world, but someone else's as well. His mind is full of unresolved tensions, unfinished emotional labor, and the vague sense that he can never quite do enough. Evening 2. A single man comes home after work. He decides what to eat based solely on what he wants in that moment. Maybe he cooks an elaborate meal because he enjoys it, or maybe he has cereal for dinner because that sounds perfect. He spends his evening however he chooses, pursuing his interests, connecting with friends, working on projects, or doing absolutely nothing. When he goes to bed, his mind is clear. He's not carrying anyone else's emotional baggage. He's not wondering if he said the right thing or did enough. He's just himself, tired from his own pursuits, ready for sleep. Which evening leads to better rest? The answer is obvious, but acknowledging it requires admitting something uncomfortable about the nature of relationships and the cost they exact on male autonomy. Nietzsche had a concept called ressentiment, which is different from simple resentment. Ressentiment is the slow poison that builds when you can't express your true feelings, when you have to suppress your authentic reactions, when you smile and nod while internally screaming. And marriage, for many men, becomes a factory of ressentiment, not because their partners are bad people, but because the structure itself requires constant suppression of authentic response in favor of maintaining harmony. You can't say what you really think about her mother. You can't express your true opinion about that couple you had dinner with. You can't be honest about how you actually want to spend your Saturday. You develop a split consciousness, the public self that says the right things and the private self that knows the truth. And that split, that constant internal monitoring and self-censorship, it's exhausting. It fills your mind with all the things you can't say, all the feelings you can't express, all the truths you have to swallow. And when you lie down at night, all of that unexpressed authenticity is still there, churning, keeping you awake, manifesting as vague anxiety or unnamed frustration. Single men don't accumulate resentment at the same rate because they can be authentic. If something bothers them, they can address it or walk away. They're not trapped in a permanent relationship with consequences that ripple through shared finances, social circles, and life plans. They can speak their truth without calculating the cost to domestic harmony. They can choose their battles because every battle is actually a choice, not an obligation. And this emotional honesty, this ability to live in alignment with their authentic thoughts and feelings, it creates a kind of inner peace that married men often lose without realizing it. That peace translates directly into better sleep. Let's talk about purpose for a moment. Nietzsche believed that man's primary drive is not pleasure, not happiness, but meaning. The will to power, as he called it, is really the drive to become more, to overcome obstacles, to pursue something greater than mere comfort. Single men have the freedom to pursue purpose with single-minded intensity. They can take career risks that married men can't. They can dedicate ungodly hours to mastering a craft, because there's nobody at home wondering when they're going to prioritize the relationship. They can say yes to opportunities that require relocation, that demand sacrifice, that offer growth at the cost of stability. They can chase their dragon without worrying about whether their partner supports the hunt. Married men, on the other hand, often have to subordinate their purpose to the needs of the relationship. The dream job in another city becomes impossible. The startup that requires 80-hour weeks becomes untenable. The artistic pursuit that doesn't pay well becomes selfish. Their purpose gets filtered through the question, is this compatible with my marriage? And often the answer is no. So they settle, they compromise, they take the safer path, the more stable option, the choice that serves the relationship rather than the calling. And here's what nobody tells you about that compromise. It eats at you. Maybe not immediately, maybe not obviously, but over time, that unlived life, that unpursued purpose, that road not taken because of relationship obligations, it becomes a ghost that haunts you. And ghosts are most active at night, when married men lie awake at 3 a.m, wondering where their life went, wondering who they might have become if they'd made different choices. That's the cost of prioritizing relationship stability over personal purpose. Single men sleep better because they're living their one life on their own terms. They're not wondering what if. They're not carrying the weight of unlived potential. They're either pursuing their purpose or accepting full responsibility for not pursuing it. There's no one else to blame, no relationship to use as an excuse. That clarity, that full ownership of their path, it brings a peace that facilitates deep sleep. Consider the nature of desire itself. Nietzsche understood that desire is what makes us human, what drives us to create and overcome and become. But desire, true desire, requires lack. It requires wanting. It requires the tension between what is and what could be. Marriage, particularly long-term marriage, often kills desire by eliminating mystery, by making everything known, by transforming the erotic into the domestic. You know every story, every habit, every response. The person who once fascinated you becomes predictable. And predictability is the death of desire. Single men maintain desire because their lives are filled with possibility. Every social interaction contains potential. Every day could be the day something changes. They live in a state of productive tension between their current reality and imagined futures. That tension, that aliveness to possibility, it's energizing. It makes life feel worth living. It creates the kind of existential satisfaction that leads to peaceful sleep. Married men often lose this. The future is mapped out. The possibilities have narrowed to variations on a theme. The person sleeping next to you isn't a mystery to be explored, but a known quantity to be maintained. And while there's comfort in that, comfort is not the same as fulfillment. Nietzsche despised comfort. He saw it as the enemy of greatness, the thing that makes men soft and complacent and dead inside, while their hearts still beat. The comfortable life is the life without desire, without hunger, without the divine discontent that drives human achievement. Single men retain their hunger. They sleep better not because their lives are comfortable, but because their lives are alive. They go to bed tired from pursuing, from wanting, from engaging with a world that still holds mystery and possibility. Married men often go to bed tired from routine, from obligation, from the slow grinding maintenance of a life that's already been decided. Here's a question that will make you uncomfortable. When was the last time you made a major life decision based solely on what you wanted, without considering anyone else's input or needs? For single men, this might be last week. For married men, it might be never, or at least not since the wedding. And this matters because autonomy, true autonomy, is fundamental to human well-being. When you lose the ability to make unilateral decisions about your own life, when every choice has to be negotiated and compromised and approved, you lose a piece of your humanity. You become a committee instead of an individual. Your life becomes a democracy where you don't even have a majority vote. And that loss of sovereignty over your own existence, it's a form of low-grade trauma that accumulates over years. You don't notice it day to day because you're busy managing the relationship, but it's there, and it manifests in 1,000 small ways, including how well you sleep. Single men sleep better because they're sovereign. They rule their own lives. They make decisions and live with the consequences without having to convince anyone else or compromise their vision. They're the benevolent dictator of their own existence, and while that comes with full responsibility for outcomes, it also comes with full freedom in the process. That freedom, that radical autonomy, it creates a kind of psychological wholeness that married men often lose. When you're whole, when you're integrated, when you're not constantly split between what you want and what's acceptable to your partner, you sleep better. It's that simple. and that profound. Let's address something that's going to upset people, but it needs to be said. The modern narrative around marriage has become almost religious in its dogma. You're supposed to want it, pursue it, achieve it, and then defend it as the best decision you ever made, even when it's clearly making you miserable. Questioning marriage publicly is treated like heresy. Admitting you're happy or single is seen as either lying or being broken somehow. But Nietzsche taught us to question everything, especially the things that everyone agrees on. He called the unexamined acceptance of cultural norms slave morality, the morality of the herd, the values you adopt because everyone else has adopted them, not because they actually serve your flourishing. Marriage has become one of those unquestionable goods in modern society, despite mountains of evidence that it makes many men profoundly unhappy. And the men who are miserable in their marriages can't even admit it, because admitting it means admitting failure, means facing judgment, means questioning the entire life structure they've built. Single men who are genuinely content, who aren't desperately seeking a relationship to complete them, these men are living proof that the narrative is wrong. They're the heretics who won't bow to the altar of marriage, who won't pretend that coupling is the only path to a meaningful life. And for that, they're often dismissed as commitment phobes, as emotionally stunted, as selfishly refusing to grow up. But what if they're actually the grown-ups in the room? What if they're the ones who've had the courage to examine their own nature, understand what actually makes them happy, and structure their lives accordingly, regardless of social pressure? What if the single men sleeping peacefully at night are the ones who've achieved what Nietzsche called self-overcoming, the ability to transcend cultural programming and create their own values? The married men lying awake, wondering where their lives went, might be the ones who never had the courage to question what they were told to want. Think about the concept of presence, of being fully in the moment. Single men have the luxury of presence because they're not constantly thinking about someone else's needs, reactions, or expectations. When they're working, they can focus entirely on work. When they're with friends, they can be completely present in that friendship. When they're pursuing a hobby, they can lose themselves in it without guilt or time pressure. They can achieve what psychologists call flow states, those moments of complete absorption where time disappears and you're fully engaged with what you're doing. Married men rarely achieve this because there's always a part of their mind that's elsewhere. Even when they're physically somewhere else, part of their consciousness is monitoring the relationship. Did I text back? Should I be home by a certain time? Is my partner going to be upset that I'm doing this? Will this create conflict later? Their consciousness is fragmented, split between whatever they're doing and the constant background process of relationship management. And this fragmentation, this inability to be fully present anywhere because you're always partially somewhere else, it's mentally exhausting. It fills your mind with low-level anxiety that never quite resolves. When you can't fully engage with anything, when you're always partially distracted by relationship considerations, you accumulate a different kind of tiredness. Not the good exhaustion of full engagement, but the draining fatigue of never being fully anywhere. And when you go to bed with that kind of fragmented consciousness, your mind doesn't rest properly. It keeps processing, keeps monitoring, keeps managing. Single men sleep better because their consciousness is integrated. When they're done with their day, they're actually done. There's no secondary process still running in the background. They can fully release into sleep because there's nothing left to monitor. Consider the role of personal space and how it affects nervous system regulation. Single men have complete control over their environment, and this isn't trivial. They can create spaces that perfectly match their sensory needs and preferences. They can control noise levels, light, temperature, order, chaos, every variable that affects how their nervous system functions. They can have silence when they need it without negotiating. They can have mess when they want it without judgment. They can arrange their physical space in a way that supports their optimal functioning. Married men lose this. Their space becomes negotiated territory. Too loud for one person, too quiet for another. Too hot or too cold. Too messy or too controlled. And these constant small mismatches between your optimal environment and your actual environment, they create nervous system stress that you might not even consciously notice, but your body notices. Your sleep quality notices. When your environment is constantly slightly wrong, slightly out of sync with what you need, you never fully relax. Single men sleep in environments calibrated exactly to their needs, and that environmental match supports deeper, more restorative sleep. Let's talk about emotional labor, a concept that's usually applied to women but affects men just as much, just differently. Married men carry enormous amounts of emotional labor that single men simply don't. They're managing their partner's emotional state, anticipating needs, remembering important dates, tracking relationship dynamics, monitoring for signs of discontent, constantly calibrating their behavior to maintain harmony. They're not just living their own emotional life, they're managing a complex emotional system that involves another person's feelings, needs, triggers, and expectations. This is exhausting work, even when you love someone. Actually, especially when you love someone, because the stakes are higher. Single men don't carry this burden. They're responsible for their own emotional state and nobody else's. They can have a bad day without it affecting anyone else. They can be in a good mood without having to modulate it because someone else is in a bad mood. They can process their emotions on their timeline without worrying about how it impacts someone else. Their emotional life is their own. And that simplicity, that lack of complicated emotional interdependence, it creates mental space that translates into better sleep. Nietzsche wrote about the importance of solitude, of having time alone to think, to create, to simply be without performing for anyone. He saw solitude not as loneliness, but as the necessary condition for authentic thought and self-knowledge. Single men have solitude built into their lives. It's not something they have to negotiate for or feel guilty about. It's just there, as much as they want, whenever they want. They can spend an entire weekend in complete silence without explaining themselves to anyone. They can disappear into thought, into projects, into themselves, without it being seen as withdrawal or avoidance. Married men have to fight for solitude, and even when they get it, it's often tinged with guilt or awareness that they're taking something from the relationship. The quality of solitude changes when it's negotiated rather than natural, when it's an exception rather than a baseline. And without regular guilt-free solitude, men lose touch with themselves. They become externally referenced, constantly looking outside themselves for validation and direction rather than inside. And that loss of internal compass, that dependence on external validation, it creates an anxiety that disrupts sleep. Here's something that's going to sound harsh, but needs to be examined. Many men in marriages are essentially living as high-functioning servants in relationships they can't leave without massive social and financial consequences. They've traded their freedom for security, their authenticity for approval, their sovereignty for companionship. And while that trade might make sense for some men at some times, let's not pretend it doesn't come with a cost. The cost is your life force, your vital energy, your connection to your own power and purpose. You become tame, domesticated, predictable. The wild part of you, the part that Nietzsche celebrated as the source of creativity and greatness, that part gets locked away. It has to, because wildness threatens domestic stability. But that wild part doesn't die just because you cage it. It remains inside you, pacing, restless, occasionally rattling the bars. And that internal conflict between the domesticated version of yourself you present and the wild version you've suppressed, it's a source of deep unrest that manifests in disturbed sleep. Single men who embrace their nature, who refuse domestication, who stay wild in the best sense of that word, they sleep better because they're not at war with themselves. They're not suppressing core aspects of their nature to maintain a relationship. They're integrated, whole, living in alignment with their actual character rather than performing a character they think they should be. And that integration, that wholeness, that's what allows for truly deep sleep. You can't sleep deeply when you're internally divided. The single man who's genuinely at peace with his choice, who's not single because he's broken, but because he's chosen sovereignty over security, that man sleeps the sleep of kings. Now, I want you to think about something and really be honest with yourself. When was the last time you felt genuinely free? Not the illusion of freedom that comes with a weekend away or a guy's night that you had to negotiate for, but actual bone-deep freedom where your life was entirely your own, and you could choose your path without considering anyone else's plans or feelings or expectations. For married men, that feeling is a memory, something from before the wedding, before the relationship, before they traded autonomy for partnership. For single men, that freedom is now. It's every day. It's the baseline state of their existence. And freedom, real freedom, it's like oxygen for the soul. When you have it, you might not notice it constantly, but you breathe easy. When you don't have it, when it's restricted or negotiated or conditional, you feel the lack even if you can't name it. You feel it in the tightness in your chest, the vague sense of being trapped, the wondering if this is really all there is. You feel it when you lie down at night and realize that tomorrow is already decided, already committed, already spoken for. That's not freedom. That's a comfortable prison. And prisoners don't sleep well, even when the cell is gilded. The great lie of modern relationships is that you can have both intimate partnership and personal freedom. You can't. Not really. Not in the way that matters. Every relationship requires sacrifice of autonomy. The question is whether the trade is worth it. And for many men, if they're brutally honest, it's not. But admitting that is social suicide. It's relationship suicide. It's admitting that everything you've built is on a foundation you no longer believe in. So men don't admit it. They push it down. They tell themselves they're happy. They perform gratitude for a life that's slowly suffocating them. And at night, when the performance stops and they're alone with their thoughts, the truth bubbles up. That's when they lie awake, wondering what happened to the man they used to be, the dreams they used to have, the life they thought they'd live. Single men don't have to perform this elaborate self-deception. They can look at their lives honestly and say, "This is what I've chosen and I'm at peace with it." They're not pretending to want something they don't want. They're not living a life designed by social expectation. They're not performing happiness while feeling empty. They're just living, authentically and without apology. And that authenticity, that alignment between how they live and who they are, it creates a peace that married men often lose without realizing it until it's too late. That peace, that simple but profound peace of living in truth rather than in performance, that's what allows for the kind of deep, restorative sleep that keeps you healthy and sane. So here's what I want you to do. This isn't about whether you're married or single. This is about whether you're living in truth or in performance. Drop a comment right now that says, "I choose truth," if you're committed to living authentically, to questioning the narratives you've been sold, to building a life that actually fits who you are rather than who society says you should be. Don't qualify it. Don't explain it. Just 3 words. I choose truth. Because that simple declaration is the first step toward the kind of freedom that lets you sleep peacefully at night. It's the acknowledgement that you're willing to look at uncomfortable truths, that you're not going to hide behind comfortable lies anymore, that you're ready to examine your life with the same ruthless honesty that Nietzsche demanded of himself and anyone who wanted to truly live rather than merely exist. And once you've done that, hit the subscribe button. Not because I'm asking you to, not because you feel obligated, but because you recognize that this channel is one of the few places willing to tell you the truth that everyone else is too afraid to speak. The truth about relationships, about masculinity, about what it actually takes to build a life worth living in a world that's constantly trying to domesticate you into mediocrity. This isn't content designed to make you comfortable. It's designed to wake you up, to challenge you, to give you permission to question everything you thought you knew. And if that's valuable to you, if that kind of radical honesty is something you want more of in your life, then yeah, subscribe. Show this video some love with a like because the algorithm needs to know that uncomfortable truths are worth spreading. But here's what I really want you to think about. We've covered a lot of ground here, pulled back the curtain on some dynamics that most people pretend don't exist. But this is just the beginning. The rabbit hole goes so much deeper. There are truths about modern society, about male psychology, about the nature of power and purpose that we haven't even touched yet. Truths that build on what we've discussed here. Truths that will make what you just heard seem tame by comparison. And that's what's coming next. I can't tell you exactly what it is because, honestly, you need to experience it without expectations. But I can promise you this. If this video made you think, if it challenged something you believed, if it gave you language for feelings you couldn't name, what's coming next is going to go even further. It's going to take the framework we've built here, and apply it to dimensions of male existence that nobody talks about publicly, but everyone thinks about privately. So make sure you're here for it. Make sure you don't miss what comes next. Because once you see it, once you understand it, your relationship to everything we've discussed today is going to shift in ways you can't predict, but will absolutely recognize as true.